Have you ever dreamt of a perfect comic book series? A series that has exciting superheroes, that has interesting and deep villains that subvert your expectations, that has character designs that look amazing, that has real characters that feel grounded, that you can actually relate to, who have problems that are like you, but also live in this magical, supernatural world that has been built and established beautifully, that melds beautifully with everything else that's going on in the story. There's drama that has unexpected twists and turns that you would never expect in a superhero comic book. Do you want something like that? Oh, and do you want something that also, builds a whole world and has a bunch of other spin-off things that are based around it, but also you don't need to even be part of the main to know what you're talking about? Do you want something like this? Well, guess what? It exists. And no, I'm not talking about Invincible. I am talking about Radiant freaking Black. I know what you're thinking. Amanda, the comic that you just had on the back of this, isn't this comic also the same as this comic? No. No. Yes, but no. We get two different versions. We're going to be talking about more about that in a minute. But right now, what I want to start with is telling you about Radiant Black. So what is this amazing series that I'm talking about? How could it possibly be at Invincible levels? How could it possibly be doing what Invincible did, but in the modern era, in now, this time, the 2020s, if you will? Well, friends, this series is Radiant Black. It is fantastic. It comes to us from a bunch of people work on this book that are very important to its success. Kyle Higgins being one of the major masterminds behind this series, as well as Marcelo Costa, who is the artist. And this series has a lot of other people also working on this issue as well. But we're going to talk about why this issue is so important in a minute, because I need to get you up to speed. So what is Radiant Black? Well, have you ever wondered what Power Rangers would be like if it was actually written and created more for adults? That's basically what Radiant Black is. And have you ever wondered what Power Rangers would be like, but if there was like a lot more mystery around even just what was happening to them? So instead of having someone like Zordon come and kind of just be like, well, you're being chosen and like, here's kind of the path you gotta go on. Not to say that Power Rangers doesn't have mysteries. It does. This is that. Kyle Higgins, who is writing Radiant Black, is also the writer that brought us Power Rangers with Boom Studios. And if you don't know the Power Rangers Boom Studios comics, they are amazing. They're phenomenal. I have read some of them. I think I've read up to like issue 12. And I gotta say, I love Power Rangers and the comic book direction, and I want to read more of it. But this is that, but for us, for grown-ups. And what's happening with Radiant Black is at the beginning, we get introduced to this main character, this protagonist named Nathan Burnett. Nathan's story is that he is a writer. He went out to LA to try to strike it on his own, to write and become a professional and make movies and do all the cool things that you can do in LA, and also write stories. And he failed and he had to come home, and he has a ton of debt, and he's trying to like basically drive Uber. It's not Uber, obviously. I think it's called Driver in the Radiant Black universe. And he is just basically having this crisis of like, what am I doing with my life? Which honestly, as someone based on where I'm at in my life, when I started reading the series, I was like, dude, what is life? Like, what is this? We have all these expectations for where we're supposed to be as artists, and you're never where you think you're supposed to be, and debt is a very real thing. Even if you went to school and got years of training in what you're supposed to be doing, you can have a lot of issues that come up, and it doesn't mean that you're going to be working in your fields or even, successful in your field if you are working in your field. And it depends also on what you even consider to be success. So already off the bat, you have a very relatable character, I think. And we sort of follow him as he's returning home. He reconnects with one of his oldest friends, Marshall, and one night they're out drinking and they stumble upon this thing. And this thing is a radiant. and it is Radiant Black, which is the name that they end up giving the character, the hero. And with Radiant Black, basically you kind of have like black hole powers. Radiant Black can also like manipulate gravity, he can fly, he has super strength because of gravitational manipulation, I believe. But the really cool thing about this comic is that we don't really know. What do we know? We know there's a Radiant and it does stuff, and why is it here, and why did it bond with Nathan, and what even are these powers and what are they based in? It doesn't answer those questions. And I think the thing that's so cool about that in the world that we have right now for comics is a lot of the big two, we already have these really predefined ideas of what, one, a superhero comic has to be, and two, like who these characters are, what are their abilities, who's more powerful than who, because you just have years and years of established continuity. Because this is an original story, none of that exists, and so we're having to find it out, and it's really not handed to you. You really have to pay attention, and it just is so well structured in that regard. So Nathan gets this Radiant, and he's trying to figure out how to be a hero with it, and he's struggling. And I mean, he's struggling in his personal life, and he's struggling here, and he's trying to get back into writing. While this is all happening, he has a really crazy fight. And during this fight, I mean, he doesn't make it, which is insane considering this is the main character of the story. So you introduce us to this character, you make us really care about him, he's the hero, and then all of a sudden he's not the hero anymore. And you're like, what? And I mean, there's no way for me to talk about it at this point without going into spoilers. I already kind of spoiled a little bit of the stuff. So I'm just going to give you guys like a major spoiler warning here, because I do need to talk about it, to talk about why this comic is so awesome if you haven't read it. But also I will say I'm going to try to not spoil everything, because the experience of reading it and the journey that you go on is so amazing. I do not want to ruin it for you. So Radiant Black is a story where these ideas, these tropes that we have from comic book superhero worlds are completely subverted. A character, you think they're safe, they're not. A character, you think you understand what they do, you don't. It just does a lot of stuff like that. So after Nathan's gone, Marshall has to kind of take over for him. And one, this is already breaking a rule that's established in the comic, so you don't even know how this is possible. Like, it's not possible. I mean, it's only possible if Nathan is not alive, which makes you question everything. Because you're like, wait, so what's happening? Is Nathan gonna die? But we like Nathan. I mean, Marshall's also super cool. So you have both of these characters that end up as Radiant Black. And then along the way, Nathan sort of comes back into the fold. There's this other reality that's known as existence. Existence is a place that you can go to basically when you're in the Radiant. It is this world where I don't even know how to describe it. It is like an other world made out of what looks like light, that is this alien reality that almost exists also inside your mind when you're fused to a Radiant. It is super trippy, super cool. And at one point when you first go to existence, literally the way the page is structured is you actually have to read inward like this. So you're watching them walk on this path that is a spiral path further in. It's like an MC Escher drawing. It's amazing. So it's already messing with the idea of how you read something just from a visual standpoint and playing with that concept. And the other really cool thing is the first issue, I think, where we went to existence was also the first blacklight issue that we got. So also all of the pages are done in blacklight. I was actually lucky enough, I was gifted a really cool blacklight issue when I was at San Diego Comic-Con. That is the latest blacklight one that they did, I believe, which is not the first one, but the second time they did a blacklight issue. And there's just so many cool things like that. Like, you can tell this is a story where the people that are creating it actually care about what the product is and want to give us something unique and cool. And that in a reality where things are constantly recycled and constantly in this cyclical link, because we're telling a hero story, and that's what hero stories kind of are. They're archetypes. They involve a lot of archetypes, and they are cyclical. We already always know what's happening. We know what's coming. And in this, you don't. And in this, it's actually looking for ways to surprise you and keep you engaged, and also just celebrate the love of the thing they're making. Like, they wanna give you things like blacklight issues because it's cool, and it's existence. So it's really cool that like when we go to existence, we're seeing it in literally a different light. Literally a different light. Like it's very, very amazing. And you don't have to only read it in black light. It's just if you put it under black light, it looks super cool because it's black light ink. So that's basically what's happening in Radiant Black. Now, I guess I should touch on a couple other things. So Marshall and Nathan are sharing the Radiant. And while this is happening, they have a bunch of bad guys that are just popping up because of course, when you have heroes, what happens? Villains come to town, and the villains also want the power of the Radiant. There are other allies they meet along the way. There are other Radiants. There is Radiant Pink, Radiant Red, who's probably my favorite Radiant, Radiant Yellow. Radiant Pink has like teleportation powers. She's basically a streamer. She also has her own thing going on, but we'll talk about that in a bit, which is also like a very modern tale. Like honestly, as someone that creates content online, when I found that out about Radiant Pink, I instantly was like, okay, that's pretty cool that they're doing that in a comic with a character. There is Wendell, who is Radiant Yellow, and Radiant Yellow is basically can see in time. And initially I was super guessing what his power was, and I did not even guess that. I thought he could like duplicate himself, or he had like illusory powers, but he can actually see through time. He's probably got the coolest powers, I think. I think Wendell's the coolest. Radiant Red is just really good at absorbing other materials around them and smashing stuff. And that is Satomi, and I love Satomi. Satomi's just got such a fascinating story. She's kind of a villain, but at the same time, she's also one of the Radiants. And even though she is kind of a villain, she has some reasons for why she is the way she is. All of the villains in this are not just villains, like for the most part. I would say maybe one person, maybe one of the villains is kind of just like a jerk, but everyone else kind of like has some reason that you can kind of get behind. And Satomi, I think, is really cool because her journey is kind of all about this sense of codependency. And I love themes like that, but we're going to get more into that in a bit. So all these villains are popping up. They have the other Radiants. They're not necessarily all united, these Radiants. They're kind of all over the place. And then robots come from space, and we kind of get an allusion to this earlier on in the series, and then we find out there's going to be basically this trial. There's going to be this war, the Catalyst War, and that's where we are right now. So we're dealing with literally what will be an invasion. And in the midst of this, as this has all been building, what did they do? They were like, well, we've already got a lot of stuff going on. We could just leave it there. But no, they gave us a vote. So as I said, Nathan and Marshall are sharing the Radiant. However, we've come to a crossroads where apparently we had to choose who was going to get to keep the Radiant. And with this issue, we're finding out who keeps the Radiant. And if you didn't notice when you bought this issue in your store, there are actually two different versions of this issue where the Radiant Black is looking different ways on the cover. So we voted. The results are in, and based on these issues, that vote was a trap. It was a trick. You tricked us, Kyle. I love it. These issues are different in the sense that there is a major difference at the end in terms of how Radiant Black is handled, who ends up with Radiant Black. One of them is where basically we got this one, which is where Marshall gets it. Yeah. And we have this one where Nathan gets it. So what does that mean? And how is that possible? And like, what is happening? Are we gonna go down two different paths? Are these things both happening simultaneously? We're going into weird multiverse territory that I'm super interested in, especially in regards to this series, because you might think you understand what the multiverse is, but I don't think you will with Radiant Black if that's where we're headed. I don't even know, because it's always, every time I read an issue, I have to speculate on something and make theories, and that's what I love about it. So that's the magic of Radiant Black. I would highly recommend checking it out. Catalyst War is just about to start. It is a great time to jump in. And the cool thing about this series is, although if you want to go through and read you know, all 25 issues were on at this point, you can. But there's also cool spin-off books that are based in the same universe. And this is something that Invincible didn't really have. Like, we did have a couple spin-offs with it, but not in the same way, not at the same level that what we would call the Massive Verse is doing. We call it the Massive Verse because I think the name for that came from when they did Supermassive, which was a crossover. And so the Massiveverse is all of the books that are in the same universe that are all, like Kyle Higgins is kind of the person that I think is overarching, like running everything, like kind of how Hickman was the head of X during the earlier Krakoan stuff. But there are other people that are involved. So it's not just him. And he actually is really good at finding talented people that are also great just because they represent different perspectives that we don't get as often in comics. And I gotta say, like, I think all of the people that he brings in are fantastic and bring something totally fresh and new. So there's a bunch of other books. There is No One, there is Infernal Girl Red, there is Dead Lucky, there is Rogue Sun, there is Radiant Pink got a miniseries. We also have, did I say Radiant Red? Radiant Red got a miniseries. And I think that's everything right now. Oh yeah, well there's also Cowl, which exists in the same universe, which is something that Kyle wrote like a long time ago. So Cowl is also basically like a property that exists in this universe, which is really cool. So it's like something that Marshall and Nathan are both fans of, which I love. Like, it's like their superhero franchise. Yeah, and that's pretty much what we have so far. And then there was the Supermassive crossover. And then there's going to be a Shift story as well, or there was a Shift story in Image, which Image was a monthly, I think it's done now, but it's like a monthly magazine that has short stories in it. So Shift also got a short story, and Shift is one of the villains. So that's basically what's going on with that. And you can jump into any of these other books. You don't need to be reading Radiant Black. They all stand on their own, but they all can add to things from the world, so you can go as deep or as light into it if you want, if something else sounds more interesting to you. What I would like to know from you, the viewers at home, is there anything in here that seems interesting? Have you heard of Supermassive? Have you heard of the Massive Universe? And are there other series or stories or characters that you would love for me to tell you more about? Because I would love to do that. I'm a big fan, and I am super hype about all of the things that are coming with Catalyst War. I personally love No One. No One is unique because it takes a comic, but then it also has a podcast, and both of those together build the story. So it's just interesting because it's like mixed media storytelling, which I think is fascinating. Radiant Red is just really, it's also really beautiful. So Radiant Red is Cherish Chen and David LaFuente, and it is beautiful, that series. I also just read Infernal Girl Red, and I was obsessed with it. It's so fun. It's very much reminds me of Sailor Moon in a really, really cool way. I know a lot of people love Rogue Sun. All of these are just really cool stories. The Dead Lucky is cool in the sense that it takes sort of a war veteran story and does something I think kind of unique with it, and is like, what if, you know, your trauma can almost be like a superpower, is kind of the way I see the Dead Lucky. It's like a burden and a responsibility, and it also gives you powers. It's like, okay. I never thought PTSD could be a superhero, and here we are. Very, very cool. So yeah, they all do different things in really cool ways, and I would recommend checking it out. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you've heard of this, and let me know if you're hyped for Catalyst War, and I'm very happy to be telling you even more about the Massiveverse as we go on here. All right, friends, that's it for me. Stay nerdy. Bye!